All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And we got just a few people in here. Thanks for showing up, guys. But that's okay because we record these and post them, so that's a good deal too. Again, we're still in the kind of low zone for news from the FAA on what's going on with remote ID. We're not again, we're not expecting much on that front until probably November, December. But we do have some information on what other organizations are doing to kind of push the FAA in a direction that's favorable to hobbyists. So, um, at the same time, we're going to start off with something pretty funny in terms of drone news. So, this comes from Gizmodo. And apparently, I like the title Prisons Fear Escape by Drone, presumably because they've never seen one. Um, so the Department of Justice, I guess, has released an audit detailing the imminent threat of drones to prison security. So I guess there have been in 2020, there have been 57 drone incidents at Bureau of Prison federal facilities. Oh, sorry, that was in 2019. Let me correct myself. Um, and in one case, a prison claims to have thwarted a drone attempting to carry 20 cell phones. Man, that's a powerful drone. 23 vials of injectable drugs, dozens of syringes, and multiple packages of tobacco. Um, so the Bureau of Prison officials said that as drone technology evolves, that future devices may have payload capabilities that could allow for lifting of an adult out of prison. So, yeah, I'd like to see that drone.
Dang.
so, uh, the current payload capacity of an average drone is roughly the equivalent to its own weight. But it's pretty interesting that they think that people are going to start escaping via drone. That seems a little far fetched.
Once the drones start to be the
Um,
size of a small helicopter.
right? I mean, at that point, why not just get a helicopter? Um, but they go on to talk about the different types of commercially available drones and yada yada yada, and then as well as counter drone technology. But yeah, I'm with you, TextJet. The absurd news is never. So, um, so I know there have been incidents where people have dropped drugs and cell phones and stuff like that in drones, and that's why a lot of like DJI drones are usually geo fenced off from prisons, and I believe FAA regulations kind of prohibit that, as well as many state and local uh, regulations as well, including Arizona. I know they have a no flying around prisons regulations, but at any rate, I thought that was pretty funny. We're gonna start seeing prisoners escape via drone, so that'll be super cool. I can't wait till we see that. Um, This one's pretty cute too. So this one creates the a Boston startup created a drone nut to fly in tight spaces, and there's a picture of this little thing, and it literally looks like a pretty thick little donut. So it's got two counter rotating propellers inside essentially a ducted fan. So it's able to fit into tight spaces. Obviously, the propeller it can bump into walls and doorways and all that kind of stuff without the drone crashing. For military and law enforcement. It's sorry, it's only being sold right now to military and law enforcement, and they're trying to make it quieter now as
You
well.
said it has just 2 props?
Yeah, it says 2 counter-rotating props inside of a
Oh,
ducted fan. So,
oh, okay.
I I know a couple months ago, there were a couple designs floating about that people were testing with, small
Floating ar
less
floating
props.
around?
Mhm. Yeah, it's not gonna be super fast, but, in terms of a flying camera that can fit into tight spaces, it helps you kinda assess a situation, so,
Yeah.
for sure. We've seen these before, and in fact, I think this is a pretty popular design for like drone wars. But they're using a drone inside of a
Yep.
tetrahedron cage to explore ice caves and whatnot. So this is pretty cool. This one's 1,000 feet below ground level to the Greenland ice sheet, and
So
it's
he's definitely under 400 feet.
yeah, definitely. So this drone's created or made by Elios. Um, Speeds up to 15 kilometers per hour. Obviously, live video feedback, HD, and thermal imaging, and the cage to kind of protect it from the walls and whatnot. Kind of like the drone hut, but this one's more like a sphere drone. So there you go. Um, Up next is a topic that Dave turned me on to today. So this is a letter from Wing, the EAA, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, or AOPA, and the AMA. They basically are. This has been addressed to um, Steve Dixon, who's the FAA administrator. And obviously, they agree that safety and security are successful to successful integration of the UAS in the United States, but they want to make sure that we can protect the protect and sustain model aviation community. And they say, excuse me, they say in the letter that model aviation is a gateway for millions of people into the world of aviation, and it is critical to the future of aerospace innovation to the United States. The aviation pioneers of tomorrow discovering flight today by designing and flying their own aircraft, often using freely available electronics and household materials. However, the proposed rule will make it nearly impossible for everyday hobbyists to share the sky. They will need to incorporate highly automated equipment into home built models and implement manufacturing processes comparable to a commercial aircraft. These requirements are infeasible for hobbyists who experiment in their garage, buy material at the local hardware store, and fly in their backyard at a local park, which is all, several of the key points that we and many others hit in our responses to the FAA when it came to um, remote ID. We urge the FAA to consider alternative approaches that promote safety and security while supporting model aviation. For example, hobbyists could notify their planned flight area to the FAA and other observers on the ground via smartphone app. Also, something that we suggested and as part of the ASTM standard that the FAA, according to the remote ID documents, have kind of poo pooed. Let's see. Today, drone operators can fly in controlled airspace around our busiest airports by notifying their planned flight area to the FAA through apps. The FAA should be applauded for digitizing these capabilities in an accessible way. That approach is safe, smart, and sensible, and could apply to remote identification. Likewise, organizations such as clubs or schools should be permitted to renew and establish identification areas over time, pre vetted by the FAA. So, again, I think a lot of this is a rehash. Yeah, well, Wing was, I believe, very supportive. Yeah, I was going to say of recreational, and they were also very supportive of the ASTM standard. In fact, there was a video with Wing and Flight Test where they were testing the ASTM standard um, for use in remote ID capable uh, for remote ID capable flights, essentially, where basically you would go on an app such as Kitty Hawk or Air Maps, and you would basically draw a polygon and say, "Here's where I'm flying. Here's my registration number," and that's that. But the cool thing about that is you're not giving your specific location. Um, we also further uh, further push that that information be encrypted and not available to the general public, but to interested parties such as the FAA or local law enforcement, that kind of thing. So, um, it's pretty interesting that these companies are pushing in that direction when they already know that the FAA has kind of
Yeah.
pushed that aside.
Yeah,
So,
what is very puzzling to me is all of these companies are very close and in good relations and good contact and steady contact with the FAA. They all have seats on the deck,
yep.
and you wonder why. And we also know, as has the FAA and um, Jay Merkel has been very clear. Once the rulemaking starts, the rulemaking team is not allowed to talk to the outside world. So, why would this group initiate this memo? So, we'll try to find that out. But it is a real puzzler. Is it something they want to put on hand when they chat with congressmen and women? So they can have an exhibit that says, "See, there's more backing than just us," and we put it in writing. But we'll try to find out. But this was a puzzler
So
to
if you
us.
want a tiny bit more background information on this, the AMA's podcast from today or yesterday talks a little bit about this.
Were you able
Yeah,
to
but you
listen in?
pop a
And
link on that.
Yeah,
did they
that's
share?
on YouTube. Um, should be
Dan,
able
did
to
they
find it.
share any insight as to why they what
Not
the
really. They
motivation
just
was?
basically said, we were talking. We've still been working on stuff since the comments period ended, and we were talking with these other corporations, realized we all had the same common goals, so we wrote a letter together. Something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I mean, here's to kind of address kind of text jets. I'm not. Let me double check and see if they're part of the Commercial Drone Alliance. Sorry for my loud
That
keyboard.
would be just wing.
Yeah.
All right, so
Let's
here's a link with a timestamp about when they
perfect.
start talking about it.
Great. Thank you.
Let's see. Yep, they are on the Commercial Drone Alliance. But also keep in mind that a lot of these organizations and companies are going to be attached to several different kind of spearheading projects, and sometimes, and I can't, again, I'm not going to speak for Google Wing or for any other company for that matter or organization, but sometimes it could be to do similar things to like what we're doing on the Drone Advisory Council, to take something that's notoriously one-sided and kind of inject a alternate opinion to that,
Yeah.
or to
As it turns out, a number of the wing engineers are also recreational drone operators, and
Mhm.
so if uh, their RID NPRM submission was very pro recreational. So we
Yeah,
appreciate it, and I've thanked them for their support of recreational UAS.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think they do. I think they're pretty aware. I spoke to the head of Wing, and this is an effort that their people feel that that recreational UAS should and can work in conjunction with um, commercial drones. Even though you're absolutely right that the CDA has a number of positions that are not favorable overall.
Yeah.
So Joshua Bardwell gave this group a hard time in his live stream on Monday because they released this press release on September 11th and thought maybe they could have picked a better day to harass the
Probably,
FAA
yeah.
than
Yeah,
September 11th about safety.
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little harsh.
Yeah. And I mean, here's the deal is that I think a lot of companies and organizations are coming around to the realization that the recreational community is the training ground for their next, corporate UAS pilots, and without that, then people are going to be walking in, who are interested are going to be walking into the industry with no stick time, essentially. Just as flight time is important to manned aviation, and there's a requirement to get a certain amount of hours to get a pilot's license, as we all know, stick time's important for learning how to fly a drone and being effective with it, especially when you're doing something as complex as mapping or deliveries, and again, a lot of that can be automated, but you need to understand the dynamics of the drone as well. So
Or
um,
inspecting ice caves.
yeah, for sure. Um, so on that same note, I do have this. This comes from ABC News, but Walmart has now partnered with Zipline, who we've discussed in previous episodes regarding. Zipline has been a major impact player in Africa and delivering of vaccines for like malaria and HIV and stuff like that via fixed wing drones. So they're going to be starting in Northwest Arkansas, and I think they've picked Fayetteville as their kind of test project. So having that as if you don't know about Zipline, there are a lot of hills there for sure. If you don't know about Zipline, they generally launch these large fixed wing drones that have a cargo compartment in them, and kind of like a slingshot launcher. They fly, they go out, they deliver the package, which is usually kind of a box and a parachute kind of situation, and the drone turns around and they capture it in a big net, and then load it up and send it back out to go. So definitely a different type of drone delivery than a lot of people think of, where we're strapping a package to a quadcopter and sending it out to do its deal. But um, it'll be interesting to see, and I think they're going to start off with kind of health and wellness type of products and whatnot from what I'm reading. So pretty interesting. Let's see. This comes from Drone DJ. I have a couple from Drone DJ today. In case you don't know, Drone DJ is a pretty good site for checking on drone news. Um, so this comes from DJI, and they will be making software changes in the near future that will offer additional data security for users. I'm sure this is in direct response to issues with the U.S. government and data possibly being able to be pushed to third parties and possibly the Chinese government, which they completely disavow, obviously. And I don't see why DJI would do that. They are an independent company, but this will allow users to kind of invoke a local data mode, which means no data will be externally shared. Um, so, if you're not familiar, there's been some legislation making the rounds that RTF drones and as well as components coming out of um,
Covered country of which China is one of the leaders,
right.
and the components include gimbals, radio frequency transceiver devices, cameras, as well
Generally
as
anything with a microchip, essentially.
it's going to be difficult for UAS manufacturers in China, which of course for us is component. We need the components, which is earlier we were talking about a U.S. manufacturer has a DoD approval, and much of their components in their drone are China manufactured. So they already have a DoD approval, so there must be a waiver process in place for
Yep.
what is it? Blue UAS, I think, is the
Teal.
yeah. Teal is the company, and Blue UAS is the U.S. government program
Oh yeah.
for coding or approving
Yep.
U.S. manufactured.
So a while ago, the Department of the Interior, which uses its drones to kind of do surveys, check fire breaks, and they even use them to start fires, like control burns and whatnot. Had to ground their fleet because a lot of their fleet was actually essentially made up of DJI drones. And so DJI is responding with kind of government edition of these drones, as well as a local data user. And DJI did go through the effort and worked with the Department of the Interior and the U.S. government to kind of create a custom software package for their drones that kind of nip this in the bud, and we're still kind of going down this path. So it's kind of unfortunate. But at the same time, it's creating a space for some other companies. So this is
So that was
the new
also another thing that was very, very briefly touched on in the AMA podcast, where they talked about the AMA meeting with the White House and their concerns about the regulations that they're trying to pass about Chinese
Chinese.
components and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean the impact it's going to have. I don't see a whole ton of impact on the recreational community, except for the fact that a lot of these companies buy in bulk or manufacture in bulk. So let's say you're a motor manufacturer in China. You manufacture motors for DJI, but you also manufacture motors for regular FPV aircraft and that kind of thing because your factory is already spooled up to do stuff like that. Well, if you lose the funding if DJI loses sales, then obviously they're buying less motors, and which means the company that's manufacturing those motors could possibly make less or go under, and that causes some issues within the recreational community. So the impact potential is there, just through the string of consumerism and whatnot. But at the same time, a lot of this is going to impact government uh, programs as well as government sponsored programs. So it could be like any organization or school that receives federal funding, which is a lot of schools, um, would be kind of hit by this in their STEM projects, where a lot of these motors, components, uh, ESCs that they're using for these projects, whether it be a drone or not, could have a potential issue getting those components for their STEM programs. So again, that goes back to impacting the future of aviation, manned aviation, and even unmanned aviation, and that development in the U.S. So pretty interesting, kind of ripple effects that could have. Kind of speaking of that same subject, Teal has launched its American-made drone, the Golden Eagle. It has a FLIR hand-drawn dual camera sensor on a two-axis stabilizer. Does 4K at 60 FPS. Has thermal vision. And flight time of up to 50 minutes, and can fly in wind speeds of up to 30 miles per hour, um, and has a range of 2 miles. It does have a foldable arm design. It looks like the arms fold underneath as opposed to rotating, kind of like the Mavic. So they probably got around some of that patent issues there. It uses a Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 chip to power its autonomous capability. It also has AES 256-bit encryption, and it also does. If let me post the product page here. I think I have it. So it also does near time. What do they call it? I think it's in the controller. Near real time. You're gonna have to forgive me. I'm sorry.
And the encryption's got to be true real time.
Yes, that is true real time. I believe it's where you use a camera image to create a 3D map.
Ah, okay.
Uh, what's the freaking word?
The
I'm sorry.
3D cartography.
Yeah, basically.
So,
So,
it's doing surface maps.
hmm so it can generate that. It has modular architecture, so it can be kind of changed about. It has hot swap capability with components, um, and completely closed ecosystem. The controller that they have with it is capable of controlling more than just their drone, anything that's Mavly compatible. Um, and pretty interesting little guy. So um,
And that's a military application, so
so yeah, right now it's focused towards military and government, in the
and
military and government direction. So
those look like some honking motors, so the price is probably high.
yeah, it weighs about 2.5 pounds, I believe.
There you go.
So let's see. I think it's got its stuff here. Do let's see. And then I've got, I'm sorry. This is something I found. This just released today. And again, this is one of those things I've scanned this, and but I haven't read it in detail. But this is coming from the Government Accountability Office, and this is a 20-page PDF where they are going over the jurisdictional property and privacy legal issues regarding commercial and recreational use of drones. And this kind of has a direct impact. They kind of, after the kind of preamble here, they go into a breakdown of the current commercial and recreational drone use in the United States, which is pretty, a little more than what we accounted for during the remote ID process, but pretty close. They're saying about 77% of the approximate 1.7 million small UAS are used recreationally, while 23% are used for commercial purposes. By 2024, the FAA predicts the recreational or the non-government use fleet will increase to about 2.3 million small UAS, with 64% use in recreational and 36% in commercial use. They also go into detail on the FAA's position on its authority over low altitude UAS operations. And they break that down a little bit. And then they kind of go into the state, local, and tribal government position on their authority. So, the FAA has always said, they have absolute autonomy over the control over the national airspace. Obviously, state and local and tribal governments, as we've seen over the years, have implemented some recreational, or not recreational, but regulations. Uh, and sometimes they're okay. Sometimes they need adjustment. Sometimes they're just horribly infringing. But at the same time, there's this kind of power play between state and local governments and the federal government in control over the national airspace. And this kind of delves into that a little bit. Um, and then they talk about property rights for airspace, and they do bring into into the argument U.S. versus Cosby, um, and a couple other things where they talk about the ability of a landowner to dictate what's entering their airspace and not. And again, with this, and this has been a big issue with some people, but there's no definitive kind of solution here. And Cosby was not definitive enough to kind of bring in some of that, and they kind of play into both sides of the argument from that perspective. So they go into several different parts of this. And this was, I believe, commissioned by the FA, or by Congress, in the FAA
Reauthorization Act.
Reauthorization Act. Yep.
Hmm.
And so this is kind of their report that was commissioned there. And um, so we're going to dive into this a little deeper and kind of look at this. But in case you really want to see, um, read it for yourself, you got the link there. So at any rate, let's see. I thought there was
The timing of this document, along with the FCC release, that the FCC put out a statement that referenced Section 374 in the FAA Reauthorization Act and that's all about spectrum band, C band and
Mhm.
L band. And now we have the GAO coming out and questioning the authority that the FAA does indeed have the authority that they claim to go after, just as Josh was saying, that they can make laws about that the FAA has full authority to make rules about all airspace from the grass blades up. So
Yep.
the timing of this is very interesting with respect to the imminent release of the
Release.
final RID rule, or
Yeah.
remote identification rule.
So we're seeing some of these documents drop from different agencies over the past couple of weeks. We've had this, as Dave said, we had the FCC on Spectrum. Before that, we had the multi-agency drop on uh, counter UAS technology. So we're starting to see some interesting things drop out of the woodwork as we approach this RID, and it's pretty interesting to see kind of the direction that things are going, and some of it was unexpected. I wouldn't have expected a multi-agency, especially a bunch of agencies that don't usually cooperate together, working together to drop a letter like that. But there's got to be some interesting things coming that they are trying to kind of head off at the pass. So we'll see what happens come November, December, and obviously we'll be in full motion on that kind of stuff. As far as news, I think that's all I have for today. Um, so the Government Accountability Office is, uh, Dave, you probably know more about this than I do, but generally the government or Congress will commission the Government Accountability Office to provide reports like this to make sure that we're moving in the right and legal direction in terms of legislation, and as well as giving, I would imagine, regulatory bodies like the FAA some level of oversight on what their priorities are, what they're working on, and whether they have the actual jurisdiction to do so.
Right. And
Um,
and so the TextJet 454 has a good question. Why does the GAO care? An agency that is, has a lot of auditing responsibility. They've got procurement responsibility. So and they reference the section in the front of the paper where they were asked by Congress in the Reauthorization Act. I think it was section 373, or 375, one or the other. I'll go back and find out what was the mandate from Congress to the GAO that prompted them to put together this study and this paper. But to me, it sounds like starting from a procurement of UAS from that perspective, as well as, but they come right at the FAA in terms of questioning their authority.
mhm. So, at any rate, I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's not a bad thing that they are involved in this. I mean, one of the key points that generally rubs me the wrong way is that we have elected officials in office, but a lot of their duties and whatnot are spooled off to these regulatory bodies that we as the people have very little control over. And so they are mandated by Congress to do certain things, which is kind of what the FAA Reauthorization Act is. um, but at the same time, we as the people, that's where the our ability to affect change feels like it drops off a little bit.
yeah.
And but it's through organizations like the DAC that we can kind of work with that regulatory body to see change at that level and keep it from kind of spooling out of control.
And the question on the screen of hasn't the FAA already won statute or precedents through court cases, and they have, and so
Hmm.
it is very odd that another federal agency would question another agency's authority. Yep.
Yeah, there's been a couple, and
Yeah, one of the court cases goes back to right after World War II.
yep.
Farmer, what was the
Yeah, it
guy's
was
name?
US versus Cosby. Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Um, so, and there, I mean, even more recently, I believe there was the not to call anybody out, but the one with Trappy, and I believe that was the one where they dictated that uh um the FAA has jurisdiction over unmanned, basically UAS and model aviation and that kind of stuff. So,
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that one changed a lot of things because they redefined an aircraft to include UAS,
yes,
and so
exactly.
I feel like navigable airspace also changed because now any place a UAS can fly is part of the national airspace.
Right. So, not that, again, I don't know a ton about the case, but I do know some things changed around that. And that's by no means an attack on anybody. Because we love everybody. But at the same time, there has been some changes from different court cases that gave the FAA a little more power, and which has kind of put us in the position that we're in now. So yeah, super fun times. Dave, you got anything for us?
I don't. We're just briefly. We're wrapping up the both the narrative and the presentation. I will be speaking at the October 22 Drone Advisory Committee. I got about a 10-minute slot. I'll be presenting safety culture topic of what can we use from general aviation or manned aviation that's applicable for to help ingrain the culture of safety in UAS. And I'm leading the subgroup on small and commercial. Chad Boudreau is leading the subgroup on recreational, and I participated on the recreational subgroup as well. So that's coming up, and we're wrapping up the presentation and the narrative. They will go live a couple days before the 1022 Drone Advisory Committee, and that should be, and that of course will be live streamed, and it'll be a virtual meeting. No face to face meetings yet with the FAA, which is a smart thing.
Yes, sir. Anybody else have
I
anything,
assume
Dan?
we'll do our best to publicize the DAC and the live links and everything so
Oh,
people get a chance
absolutely.
to watch it.
Yeah.
And they can post comments on the YouTube stream that probably nobody at the DAC will be able to see.
Yes. Yeah, be nice.
I always wonder who moderates that stuff, because
Yeah.
usually it's
It's the comms folks of the FAA. And they are definitely they're a great crew, and they're hustling and trying to work through all the government bureaucracy to get an event live streamed. And if anything goes wrong, they catch it, and if it goes right, they don't hear about it. So they're a good group, and
And there's
we're
nothing they can do about the comments. The comments aren't
great.
usually directed at them.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, the comments on any of those are usually entertaining
A
at
little
least.
harsh. Yep.
But I mean, that's the thing, is we got a very passionate group of people who participate in this hobby, and I think that's important. And passion is, as long as it's placed in the right direction, is a great thing. So
Yeah.
um
If any serious comments do come up, a good way to approach it is to send an email to the DAC and ask for your comments to be included in the minutes of the subsequent
yep.
DAC, and that at least gets some level of visibility. And that's a good way. If you've got, you're listening and it's like, geez, I don't agree with that, then write it down, email it to to probably Eric Amend, the
Hmm.
manager who manages logistics for the DAC, and they're required to post that in the minutes of the following meeting.
Do we have
Absolutely.
any guess when the DAC's going to announce new members? Is that before the
We
October meeting or at the October meeting?
usually and so I'm hoping that they do announce on 1022, and we'll hear if I'm accepted, or who they've accepted to the couple of open slots.
They'll
Yep.
add a dozen new recreational representatives, right?
There you go.
I think
There you
there's, what,
go.
5 slots open. So
Yeah. For your first, I read 5, then 3, then they said several. So yeah, we'll see what comes to pass.
all right. So, well, we'll be there, obviously cheering Dave on for his presentation, because he usually does a great job, and he definitely did a great job with his last presentation. So, um, but at the same time, I think that's all we have for today. So I will give you back the rest of your evening. finishing a little ahead at 13 minutes before the hour. But I do appreciate those who have attended, and I do appreciate those who will watch or listen later when we post the podcast.
Yeah. Does anybody else on this call have any questions or things we should look
let me just not
into?
cut
Or...
anybody off.
Apparently, you've just got something better to do. You're ready to go.
No, not at all. I segment my time. I go, half hour after. We'll be fine. So, anybody? No?
I guess
Apparently
we've
I
already
offended
answered all their
everybody.
questions.
Okay. All right.
All right, guys. Have a
Thank you,
great
everyone.
night.
And stay
Thank you.
safe, everybody.
Goodbye.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Take care.
You too.